Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and I'm honored to host this daily conversation. Please share this with your friends and family around the world. Tag your friends, share with your friends right now. We're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. Today is episode number 114, 114 episodes in 114 days. And our topic is news you missed. The last time we did this was episode 59. So it's been a bit of time since we had time to do news you missed, but we have a lot to cover tonight. Our hosts and co-hosts and guests for the show are the same folks who were there the previous times we've had news you missed. Robert Anthony. Bob Anthony's at New York Bob. He's a veteran tech journalist. And Vandana Menon is at Vandana_Menon, and she's a freelance journalist. In this series, as you know, we discuss three crises: health, the economy, and race. We're always looking for ideas, guests, and theme suggestions. Please email us, sree@sree.net. Please tag a friend. Please share this. You will meet Bob and Vandana in a couple of minutes. In the meantime, we want to tell you about a couple of other shows that we have coming up as well. So it's Friday in America, it's Friday night in New York, and we have the whole weekend. And instead of taking off the weekend, we have a very busy weekend with lots going on. So we want to tell you all about it. Tomorrow night is our 115th episode, and we're doing What America Means to Me. On the most unprecedented July 4th holiday in memory, multiple guests will reflect on what America means to them, not Americans too. And you can participate by submitting your video of what America means to you, wherever you are in the world. And how can you participate? Very easy. We have a page all set up for you to participate. You can see on the screen, the link is flipgrid.com/3July4. flipgrid.com/3July4. Write that down or take a picture, and you'll go to Flipgrid and you will be able to participate. So let's show you what that looks like. You can see here what America means to me. It's flipgrid.com/3July4. And you go there, you'll see a little greeting from me. And then you can hit the plus button and record a 1-minute video. And people from all over the world can do that. What America means to you, good, bad, ugly, whatever, please tell us. Flipgrid.com/3July4. And that way you can participate in this special episode tomorrow, Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern. The reason we're going super late tomorrow is because we want all of you to watch the Macy's parade of fireworks on TV and not go out and try to go to your local fireworks if you have them in the US. So 10 p.m. Eastern on Saturday is our What America Means to Me episode. And then on Sunday, for Sunday Night Positivity, we have two special guests who are going to be joining us. Dr. Arti Krybek and Dr. Tom Krybek will be joining us. Arti is running for Congress in Tuesday's New Jersey primary election. And both of them will talk about her run. We'll talk about the scientific situation with everything happening, the medical situation, and we'll learn a lot. This is our regular positivity story or a segment, and we always say that even in the middle of all of this, we can try to be positive. So make sure you get a chance to take a look on Sunday night at 9 p.m. So we have 3 episodes coming up this weekend that are really connected to everything that's happening in the world. And Sundays also mean 2 other shows. We have the Sunday New York Times read-along at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll be joined by Trish Hall, former editor of the New York Times op-ed page and author of Writing to Persuade, an insider's look at the New York Times op-ed page. So opinion essays, how to write them, from Trish Hall. Please join us for that, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. Let's also make sure we thank our sponsors and Rutgers, globalentrepreneurshipexperience.org, globalentrepreneurshipexperience.org. It's a virtual teen camp, and your teenagers can learn from entrepreneurs at Google, Facebook, Cognizant, and other places. This is in July and a 20% off with the code SREE. So take a screenshot, take a photo, and send this to friends and family. Anybody in the world who's a teenager can participate. We also want to thank our sponsors, Muckrack Academy, for allowing me to create Fundamentals of Social Media, which is a free certification course that anybody in the world can take. More than 4,000 people have already signed up. mrac.co/social. mrac.co/social. Again, take a photo, take a screenshot, send it to your friends. Any experience, any background from anywhere in the world, we'd love to have you participate. And we also have our first video ad, so we're excited about that. Stand by to watch our first video ad on our show.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar. I'm an ear, nose, and throat surgeon in New York City and New Jersey.
And I'm Dr. Marina Kurian. I'm a general surgeon in New York City area.
We'd like to introduce you to our new show, She's on Call. We air live on social media platforms from 11 a.m. to noon every Sunday Eastern Time. We discuss the medical topics of the week.
We have two great guests, experts in their field, that help us analyze and look at some of the topical issues of healthcare. And we are on 11 to 12, so please join us.
We'd love to answer your questions, so please share and watch and send us your questions and comments.
See you Sundays at 11.
We're very excited about that show. Sundays at 11. She's on Call. I'm honored to be a co-executive producer of that with my friends, Drs. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Kurian. And now, on to tonight's episode, News You Missed. And we want to hear what news you think we missed. Please comment. Please tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, let me bring on our guests tonight who have been on the show multiple times in multiple avatars, and they're here tonight as well. Please welcome Bob Anthony. Hi, Bob. Well, we're just going to unmute your mic, Bob. And Vandana Menon.
Hello.
Hi, folks. How are you? It seems like we were just here, but actually we haven't done this particular episode since episode 59, and today's episode 114. I can't do the math, but it's a long time ago.
And so much has happened. It's kind of ridiculous. It's Friday, and I don't know what I did this week. Time just flies.
The time, I think time has taken on a whole new meaning, and typically Friday night on a long weekend like this, nobody would be watching, but people are watching because people are home or people are around, and it's such a confusing time. But let me start, as I always do, ask you, Bob, how are you doing, and how are you making it through this pandemic? And then we'll ask the same of Vandana.
I'm still trying to keep myself on lockdown, trying to go outside as little as possible, getting enough done. And I'm kind of actually glad I did this week, because some of you may have seen on the news this building in Brooklyn that collapsed at the corner of Court and Union Streets. That's on my walking route to the subway. So I wasn't happy to see that on the news. It's sort of another bit of encouragement to stay inside. But otherwise, I've watched the neighborhood basically stay quiet. I'm healthy, luckily. And I'm just doing my best to stay positive and stay busy. And thanks to other people, it's been working.
Yeah, and thank you for staying indoors and trying to stay busy, as you said, while staying on lockdown. So important. And we'll look at that Brooklyn story in a little bit as well. Vandana, how are you? Vandana is a freelance reporter who's also co-producer of this show, as well as She's on Call. And we've worked together now for 114 straight days. And your other co-producer, Rose Horowitz, is tweeting away, Rose Horowitz 31. So Vandana, you tell us how you've been and what it's been like to be under lockdown.
I've been okay. I can't believe it's been over 100 days. Like you were saying, time has kind of lost all meaning. I've been watching a lot of stuff about time travel lately, and I feel like that's a good theme. I'm still waiting for someone from the future to come and tell us exactly how we're going to get through this time. But interestingly, right before coming on tonight, as I have done for the other two times that we've done this version of the show, news you might have missed, I've Googled uplifting news from the last 1 week. And the previous two times, almost nothing came up. But this time when I did it, there were multiple websites with curated lists. And that itself, I feel like, is a sign of, how we're beginning to change the way that we see the pandemic as much more of a long-term thing.
So there is uplifting news. I want to hear that for sure. But there's so much terrible, terrible news also that we have to talk about. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. I want to remind everyone who may have missed this before, Bob, who's a veteran tech journalist, and I've been friends for a long, long time. And he and I were talking at the beginning of the pandemic, and he told me a couple of stories that happened not just in my neighborhood, happened in my train station that I overlook from my building. And I hadn't heard that. And I told him, how is that possible? And he said, there's just too much news going on and it'll be very hard to focus. And that's where we came up this idea. That day we said, oh God, we got to do a show on news you missed. And here we are now after all this time doing these shows. So Bob, how do you keep track, and do you try to keep track? What is your mix of kind of pandemic news and then the protest news and then the economy news? And in your mind, are you trying to separate them, or is it all kind of jumbled together?
I'm doing my best to balance it better than I was before, because I was doing what a lot of other people were doing. I guess they call it doom scrolling, basically looking for the bad news of the moment.
Wait, one second. I've not heard that term, doom scrolling.
Yes, basically, yes. It's. I didn't invent it. Don't give it to me. And it's basically looking online for whatever has blown up today. Usually it starts with Trump said, but other times it'll start with the coronavirus or whatever. So I used to have 1010 Winds on behind me. I might have the news stream in front of me, and I might have my notifications coming in on the tablet. So it ended up being a bit too much. So now I try to listen to music. I'll check in with the news every so often, but I'll check the notifications as well, which is what the only way I knew about that building collapse was because I had the Citizen app on. So I'm trying to balance it and not overwhelm myself with this bad stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's ask Vandana what she does. And by the way, we should point out that Bob and I are the olds in this, so we are fascinated by what the younger generation is doing.
I don't think I've been very good at separating my news or maintaining any sort of balance. I just kind of consume whatever shows up on my screen. But one thing that I have been doing a lot more of is watching more TikToks and videos and things like that, because there's been lots of humorous approaches to the pandemic. And I think that's always nice to be able to laugh at what's happening as well, even though it's terrible. Yeah, I think there's been a lot of interesting content coming out.
All right. Well, before we see the news you missed, let's do our global tour. And as always, you know how this works. We have people watching. And guess who's the first one there every single day? Jonathan Borstein. Hi, Jonathan. He was a guest on our 100th episode, as was Bob. He's watched for 114 straight days, which is incredible because no one else has watched every single episode. I've barely watched every single episode, even when I'm in it. So thank you, Jonathan, for joining us in Union Square. Bob, any memories of Union Square you want to share?
It's sort of a tech center for me, because if it wasn't Best Buy, it was some other high-tech store or high-tech event. So I have good memories of, just turning into a geek in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's great. And what about you? Have you spent time there, Vandana? I know you live in Philly. We should tell everyone you live in Philly. Bob lives in Brooklyn.
I live in Philly. Yes, I've been to Union Square, of course. There's a great taco place nearby called Tacombi that I like to go to. And of course, the Shake Shack that's there. So I have spent one particularly freezing winter night because I just wanted to eat a burger at Shake Shack.
Well, we should say that we should tell people that Philly is a great food town also. There's so much great food there. What are a couple of places that if people could get to Philadelphia, they should definitely try?
Well, everyone talks about the Philly cheesesteak. I like it. I find it's really heavy. But that there are, depending on who you ask, I don't think I'm enough of an authority to tell you which is the best cheesesteak, but there are a bunch of those. I really like, there's this one South Indian restaurant called Amma's South Indian in Center City, which I really like because it makes food that we eat at home.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's a lot of, yeah, tonight I have ordered dinner from a place called Dan Dan Noodles.
Oh, well, will they deliver while you're eating, while you're here? I hope you'll show us.
No, we have, my roommates have ordered from before, so I know that's waiting for me.
Okay, terrific. Let's see who else is here. Rahadyan is watching from Center Reach near Stony Brook on Long Island, and Stony Brook is where I teach, and I'm missing my colleagues and friends there. Of course, it's the summer, and we don't know what's going to happen in terms of classes and things, not just at Stony Brook, but all over. You know, when we last talked, it was 55 plus days ago. It really was a different time. We were thinking that we are bending the curve, flattening the curve, and now we're at an all-time high in America. Nowhere else in the world is it this bad, and a real shame. It's like, I feel that all the work we put in the Northeast, the sacrifices, the 125,000 people who died, the people who lost their jobs, it's like no one has learned anything, and it's so sad. Anand's watching from Andhra Pradesh. I haven't asked Bob, you're a world traveler. Have you been to India?
I have not. It's one of the vacant spots on my map. I have to get there someday.
All right. You know, our guest Will Sutton last Sunday said India's on his bucket list, and then he corrected himself, not bucket list. He said just list, because
yes. I agree with him. He's a sharp guy.
Yeah, he is. And Tim says he likes the hat in my ad for tomorrow. Tomorrow we're doing What America Means to Me, and this was actually Vandana's idea when we were making our story meeting, our show meeting with Rose. She said, why don't you put that hat on your head? And so there we have it. You have to be careful what you suggest to me, because it might suddenly happen. So Tim, thank you very much for being here. Tim is a great live streamer and teaches live streaming classes. If you get a chance, you must take a look. And Wolf is here from Haiti. Very nice to have you here, Wolf. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate having you here. Oh, look at this. Karthik says, America, Donald Trump has made America greater than ever. Yes, greatest in economic loss, healthcare loss, and deaths in this pandemic that can be put on the doorstep of a president who is not talking about it. And then there's a big story today, right? He's going to Mount Rushmore, and he is going there despite the Native Americans asking him not to be there, and also they have banned fireworks at Mount Rushmore for decades, and now he's allowing them because of the fire problems, right? The wildfires, they're not allowed there, but because he's present, that's happening. I think is that tonight that's happening, or tomorrow? I think it's tonight. Let's see. My mom's watching from Kerala. Hi, Amma. Love you. You just had heard Vandana mention Ammas. Amma is the word in Malayalam from the state of Kerala for mother, but of course many other places use that too. And Radhyan says 55 days ago. Ashok is watching from Kerala in India as well. Let's see who else is here. Rose is here, our co-producer. And Rose and Vandana have gotten to know each other very well. They didn't know each other when they started this volunteer effort first, and now we're running it as close to a business as we can, thanks to our sponsors and thanks to all of your support. We really appreciate it. Stefan says it's Friday and I didn't even know what day it was this morning. Time is a blur right now. So Bob, my friend, I feel you. And Rose's Twitter handle is Rose Horowitz 31. Please tweet, follow her. And Laura is watching from Philadelphia. Heat and fireworks tonight. And Vandana, have you met Laura yet? You're both
No. We'd connected in January, and then I wasn't in town, and then the pandemic began.
Here, Bob's story of getting quoted in the New York Post about that Brooklyn gym building collapse was fascinating. Can't wait for him to tell it. I will stop now. It's his story. Ooh, okay, so we'll go to that in just a minute. And let's see. Mark says, how are you doing? Mark, thank you for being here. Mark has been a guest on the show and a terrific part of our family here of people who watch this show on a daily basis. Here, Radin says, neither of you is old. Classic, vintage, not old. Okay, Bob, we'll take that. What do you think? And Mark says, virtual world is so wonderful. Usually there would be a festival live, but instead we're doing it virtually. Some is being done live. I recorded my part last week. Laura says, I've been actively avoiding doom scrolling. As a result, spending much less time online and on social. More Sudoku, jigsaw puzzles, reading, and snacking. Ooh, I could get behind almost all of that. Jigsaw puzzles, I'm terrible at. Either of you puzzlers?
I
No?
don't have the patience for it. Maybe
Mark
that has something to say.
Yeah. Mark says Durham in the house, North Carolina. Union Square is also known as Silicon Alley. Let's talk about that for a second, Bob. Silicon Alley was a term that we used to use in the mid-90s. I don't hear it that much anymore. Why is that?
You're absolutely right, because I think it's kind of spread. It used to be we had that hotspot in Manhattan where a lot of these internet startups were being concentrated. But now they're all over the city. They're in Dumbo in Brooklyn. That's between the two bridges. They're in Williamsburg. They're in the Bronx, in the building that used to print money. I forget what they call that building. So it's not so much an alley. It's sort of these startups are all over the place in the city. But you're right. It's a phrase I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah. And it used to be something that we used to use all the time. And of course, there are many Silicon, right? There's Silicon Prairie, Silicon Valley, Silicon Beach in LA, Silicon Prairie, I think is Chicago or somewhere, I'm not sure. And what else? There are some other, I've forgotten what they're called. In Texas, they have Austin. I forget what they call that too. Let's keep going here. Stefan says he's retweeted every single episode. Claim that. Wow. Okay. That's pretty amazing. Retweeting every single episode. Thank you so much. And Stefan says, when this is all over, Digimentors will eat at both of your favorite foodie spots. So that's great. And Radyan's already put an ad in here for Amma's in Center City, Amma's restaurants. And have you been to Zahav? Asks Julia.
No, but I've heard so much about it. It's supposed to be this amazing, if I'm not wrong, Israeli restaurant, and I think they've got a Michelin star or multiple. I haven't been there yet. I think the waiting list is really long as well.
Yeah, we hope all these great restaurants survive these crises, you know. Mark says, a great Indian restaurant hit Vimala's Curry Blossom in Chapel Hill. All right. So anybody watching? And Rose says, count me in for these meals around Union Square. Vandana and all of us have to meet in real life. Rose said, my son did a 1,000-word puzzle in the beginning of the pandemic. All the colors were the same. He never looked at the picture. Goes by seeing the shapes. He's a master. That's incredible. So 1,000-piece puzzle without looking at the colors, where they're all very similar. You need the colors to be different in order to do a puzzle. So I'm surprised. And Mark says RTP is a major silicon and computer area as well. That's the Raleigh Triangle. What's the P stand for? I forget. Jonathan says Silicon Alley is making a comeback of sorts with the tech hub on 14th Street and Irving Place and several new buildings in the corridor between Union Square and Astor Place. And Zahav, the Israeli restaurant in Philadelphia. Radyan is like a master annotator of all of these. So lots going on. Let's start by, I know Vandana has a story that she has pulled up and she wants to share. So she's actually stepping on Bob's toes a little bit without telling him by doing a tech story, Bob. So you'll have to do an Indian or international story pretty soon. Well, let's start with this story. Tell us what's going on in India that you felt that many of us should know about.
Oh, there's a lot going on in India. But this particular story I thought was interesting because yesterday, last night, India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani, who runs Reliance, have launched something called JioMeet, which is a rival to Zoom. And it's basically the same as Zoom. It has the same user interface. In fact, I think they've even used the same buttons. But the interesting thing is they don't have a time limit. Zoom has a 40-minute time limit, and JioMeet, you can go up to 24 hours and you can have over 100 people. And as of now, there still isn't a payment plan. So it might just end up being free. And it's interesting because Reliance Jio, over the last 2 months, has netted $15 billion in investment. So they seem to be really doing well in this pandemic.
Yeah, and that's a big market, obviously, not just India, but worldwide. There's no reason it should not be available everywhere. And Zoom is such an interesting story. Some of you remember we've talked about this in the past. They had 10 million users as of December 1st, And by March 1st or 15th, they had 200 million users. And their experience has been obviously very successful, but also mixed. They've had problems. The CEO had to do an apology tour. Some of you remember that. So the fact that Reliance is doing this, and Jio, especially Jio, is the cell phone company that they introduced that now has the cheapest cell phone service in the world. And India has the largest market for internet users after China. And
I think about 400 million people.
Yeah,
if I'm
and
not
so
wrong.
and we maybe even slightly more. Depends on how you calculate it. Smartphone, feature phone, etc. But we did this episode earlier this week with Nikhil Pawa, who's at NIXXIN, who's a Delhi-based digital rights activist. India, as many people know, banned 60 apps made in China earlier this week, and that next day we had Nikhil talking to us from Delhi, and we learned a lot from him. So there's just so much going on in India in the tech sector. So many other stories too, but that was interesting. So thanks for sharing that. Any thoughts from you, Bob, about this? I don't know if you've seen the story yet.
I had not, but it's impressive to me how there's, even though a lot of these major video conferencing platforms have been around for a while, there's still room for expansion. There's still room for another product, still room at the edges or right out in front. So this doesn't surprise me that other people want to challenge Zoom and TikTok and these other platforms.
So let's look at this story that Bob's been mentioned in. I am trying to find it. Okay, here we go. So Bob, do you want to tell us what happened and what the story is? Wow, look at that. That's stunning. Yes.
Oh, the video's even running, which is kind of cool. Talking about staying at home and trying to do as little as possible during a pandemic. I was home on Wednesday, just doing what I told you I was doing, listening to the news and music. And then my phone gave me my Citizen app on my phone gave me an alert that it's one of the.
Can I stop you for 1 second just to say this man is wearing his mask wrong? You've got to close your nose. There's no point if you're not closing your nose, and it puts the other person in danger. If the important thing is that the other, the person wearing the mask, you have to wear your own mask, but the other person has to wear it right also. And the fact that he had it below the nose is a failure of that mask. So you've got to put it above your nose, pinch it, make it tight. This is the result of talking to 35, 40 doctors on these shows these weeks. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No, that's fine. But the Citizen app, which I guess most of you are familiar with, is an app that alerts you to police incidents and other incidents in your vicinity. So I got an alert on the Citizen app, which said gym collapse. And to me, that meant nothing. Gym collapse, that made no sense. Did a jungle gym, fall down? But the Citizen app also allows you to stream video. And when I looked at the video of that building, it had collapsed from top to bottom. And this is, like I said, it's on my way to the subway. I know, and the funny thing is, every time I've passed that building, I've noticed that bulge in the wall on the Union Street side. And I always wondered if they would ever get around to repairing that, and obviously not. So what happened is that a reporter for the New York Post in the Citizen app, in the comment section, Reuben Fenton, as it turned out, left a message saying, "I'm a reporter for the New York Post. If you're a witness to this, please contact me at this email address." I wasn't a witness, but I knew about the building. So I emailed him just to tell him that, yes, I know that building. Yes, it did have a bulge. Yes, it did have structural problems that seemed visible. And I even screenshotted a couple photos from Google Maps and zoomed in so that he could see what I was talking about, the bulge in the wall. So I sent it to him just to help a reporter do his work. And I checked in on the Post website a few hours later, and there I was quoted, much to my surprise. So it's just proof positive that even when you think you're being useless at home in a pandemic, you can help somebody.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad everybody was okay. It was closed at the time, and so no one was injured, but no one was walking by either. If this had been kind of prime time pre-COVID, there'd be lots of people on that sidewalk at any time, right?
There'd be some, and like I said, that sidewalk is my route to the subway. I would be on that side of the street walking. And, as far as this show is concerned, this is the type of news you wouldn't have heard 3 weeks ago. But the news of the coronavirus has at least settled to the point where this news can at least slip in. So,
right. Yeah, that's true. Let's talk about the Citizen app, because I'm sure lots of New Yorkers and Americans know it, but it may not be even available overseas. Just a minute on that, please.
Well, first, before I get into it, I want to ask you, is this the same app which I saw years ago at a social media weekend? Back then it was called Vigilante.
Yeah, I don't. I hope I'm trying to remember. I don't know if they changed their name.
I know it's the same app. I'm just wondering where I saw it for the first time, because I remember this app when it was first developed.
Right.
There was a lot of pushback because it allowed you and I to send in the alerts. In other words, if I didn't think you looked right, I could put an alert on Vigilante that this tough-looking Indian guy was walking around 96th Street with food in his hand. That they no longer do. They changed the name, changed it to Citizen app, and now what the app does is send 911 reports and other incidents, somewhat filtered, to the app. It gives you a red dot at a location. I could pull it up on my phone at if it was handy, and it would give you a red dot if there was a serious incident in your area, or it would be a yellow dot to be if it was just something you should be aware of. But during the protest, there was a lot of red dots. Let me tell you that.
This was called, working title is Vigilante. You're right, and it was.
It just shows how old I am.
Yeah, but it also tells you what a bad idea that is, especially now. We're seeing people calling. Remember that horrible video of that woman?
Central Park Karen.
In Central Park Karen, or Anne, I think that was her real name. And she became a Karen. And by the way, shout out to all my friends who are really named Karen, who are very nice people. And we feel very bad for them being pulled into all of this. But she was calling on the phone and saying a black man, an African American, is threatening me, and that's what she said. So I'm glad they don't do that anymore. But this app is called Citizen. It's available in Philadelphia and a few other cities, but it doesn't look like it's international yet. And there may be other apps as well. Let's hold on. Let me get to Bob. Let's go ahead, Bob. Hold it up.
I'm not sure if it messes up because of the I'm using a virtual background, so you can't see me.
That's hilarious. But so what happens? So you hold that up. I mean, you look at it and it'll alert you that in your neighborhood.
There's a map. There's a basic map on it, and it has it's sort of a scaled down Google type map of your vicinity based on your phone's location, and it'll give you a dot. It'll say trash fire at Livingston and Court, or it'll say shots heard at Lorraine Street and Columbia, which is in Red Hook. If you tap on the alert, you'll go to a page, and if anybody happens to be live streaming the video, you'll get the live stream, a la Periscope or Twitter or any other app that'll allow you to live stream. So it's crowdsourced to the extent that the person there does the streaming, but the reports are official, which is the part that was the problem before. Before it was just some citizen saying there's a problem here.
Thank you. For folks who are just joining us, we're doing News You Missed, and our guests are Vandana Menon, who's a co-producer of this show, and she's in front of the camera today to help us with this, and Robert Anthony, New York Bob on Twitter, and she's Vandana_Menon. Tomorrow, we have a very special episode for July 4th. It's July 4th, so we're going to be talking about what America means to me, and you can participate. As you can see on the screen here, we're asking you to send in your video, flipgrid.com/SreeJuly4. So flipgrid.com/SreeJuly4. We'll put that on the banner so you can see it as well. Just record a 60-second video about what America means to you, wherever you live in the world. You don't have to be American to participate. We'll also have guest speakers who will talk to us about America and what it means to them. And we'd love for you to send us a video. We've also put that address right on the screen throughout the show tonight. You'll be able to see it says flipgrid.com/Sree July 4th. So just write that there. You go onto your phone or your laptop, press the record button. There's a big green record button. Just record it and give us a 60-second message for July 4th. And you don't have to be American to participate. In fact, we'd love to hear from some non-Americans as well. So let's go now to Vandana, who has an unusual story for us that she's picked out about Pakistan. And I'm just going to call that up on the screen. And Vandana, you tell us what the story is and why it's important and why you picked it.
Over a month ago, there was a really tragic plane crash in Pakistan, and I think 97 people died. And it came out as they were investigating it that the two pilots who were flying the plane were actually talking about COVID and coronavirus when they got in a radio call from the air traffic controller saying you should be careful. And apparently the pilot said, oh, we've got it under control. And then the air traffic controller could hear them going back to talking about COVID. And of course, it ended really tragically. And in the investigation that unfollowed, it turns out 1 out of 3 pilots in Pakistan have fraudulent licenses. And so there's been a huge number of people who've been suspended. Everyone has to go back and retake their exams. The EU, Vietnam, Malaysia, I think even Saudi Arabia have all banned Pakistan's state carrier, which is Pakistan International Airlines. And I was just, mind blown by that story. I think it's absolutely 1 out of 3 is a huge, huge number. And that's terrifying because it's supposed to be the safest way to travel. And it made me think of the Malaysian airline, the MH370, and how that airplane just disappeared. And I always think about, I know this is a slightly paranoid way to think, but yeah, I thought this was interesting.
Sure. What do you think of the story, Bob?
I'm stunned, actually. How can 1 of 3 be questionable? I mean, that's you would be worried about, say, an Uber driver or a Lyft driver not being having the right licenses or the right experience, but that's rather scary. That's the truth, and B, you can just imagine what that's going to do to people's willingness to travel
and confidence in Pakistan.
Already things are so bad, right? Like, this is the last thing the travel industry needs is any doubt about any pilot, let alone 30% of one large international carrier. They have almost 900 pilots, and to imagine that whatever number 200, 300 have fake licenses is.
I'm curious as to how this might affect repatriation flights, because I assume their national carrier is what's flying people home.
That's right. Yeah, especially from the Middle East and elsewhere. The only way to get back to Pakistan or get to India is to go on one of these national carrier flights. And PIA has had history of issues with its travel, as have most developing country airlines. It's not unusual. The joke in the 70s and 80s, PIA, Pakistan International Airlines, there's a word called Paunchenge. It means we will reach. And it was Paunchenge, inshallah, which was a joke about this, that we will reach, inshallah.
With God's grace,
With God's grace. And here we are now seeing this. So something that was a joke that people would make has now come tragically real for people, not just in Pakistan. Obviously, anytime a pilot is in the air who doesn't have a license, he's a threat, not just to himself, but herself, but to the entire plane and everyone else in the sky and on the ground. Very, very scary. Let's go to another story. Bob has a question. Yeah, please.
Is that still a big number, the number of people who are waiting to be repatriated through these airlines?
I think so. I can't speak for Pakistan, but for India, yeah, for sure. In fact, the Department of Transport, the U.S. Department of Transport, just will be curbing Air India. Air India is India's national carrier. Air India flights, because they believe that they've been carrying out discriminatory practices because Air India has been charging for tickets an exorbitant prices. It's really, really expensive to get a ticket on this plane. And so I think that's one way for them to kind of filter out need-based, like who has to travel. But the Department of Transport has basically said that's not a true repatriation. People who really, truly need to be repatriated will be repatriated for free.
Okay.
So I think it's a pretty large number. And yeah, but at this point, I think the urgent need for repatriation has also come down. Now people have sort of kind of, accepted that we're in this for the long haul. So those who needed to go home, hopefully, have managed to do that.
And as people have gone home, they've also added in some countries to the coronavirus problem because they're coming from places where they may not have been isolated and socially distant, and then they come home. So let's go to one of Bob's stories. Bob has a tech story. Big surprise, Bob.
And I can thank my tech friends for this one. Like I said, my friends pull out the stops for me when they know I'm going to be on the air, because I hadn't heard about this. Samsung and Motorola, I guess, they've made foldable phones with the screens with a seamless fold that you can open up and you won't see the
like this, and then you don't see the fold in the middle, right? Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And now LG, at least this is BGR, Boy Genius report, and I consider them pretty reliable. And there's also a report on Tom's Guide, tomsguide.com, that LG has a prototype of a rollable cell phone. In other words, something that you can roll up, I'm an old guy, like a newspaper, and still have the functionality. So it's not only the screen that's flexible, it's the entire unit, I guess, with the touch points that would be usable even when the phone is folded, unfolded, or whatnot. Those are simply LG phone photos. I don't believe anybody has a prototype photo yet. LG has LG's version of a foldable phone really doesn't have a foldable screen. It's sort of a 2 screens and a hinge, which isn't bad actually, because you can have different things going on either side. But the fact that we have a rollable phone prototype allegedly on the way kind of blows my mind. But here again, is this good tech or a solution for a problem that nobody asked?
That's interesting. That's an interesting way to put it. I remember my first phone was a flip phone, and I specifically wanted a flip phone because it was just so exciting to be able to do that. So I can't envision this. I'm curious to see what they put out.
So I understand a foldable phone, right? So a foldable phone is if it's like this, if you open it, you get double the screen. So then you turn the phone and then you have the full thing there without a problem. That's great. And then I also understand rollable screens for watching a TV. So we've seen televisions that are, they roll over, you can think of a screen, right? Like the old projector screen. So it folds in a box and then it opens up and then you project onto your TV. So it saves room in the room, right? So that I understand. But what is the point of a rollable phone? The phones are so small. What are you going to be rolling? And every time you roll it, I don't understand it. Can you, I know you haven't seen it, but what are these reporters saying about this?
Well, I agree. I don't see the problem. Like, I'm not a big fan of the folding phones that are out there. Motorola, to its credit, has a phone that it's sort of a throwback to the old flip phone. So that's kind of their selling point. It's not actually a powerful phone. Samsung's Galaxy Fold is a powerful phone with a lot of folding problems, which is what you don't need in a folding phone. So I don't know. It's funny how some pieces of tech go nowhere, like 8K TVs or 3D TVs. Sometimes it's just more glitter than usefulness.
Let's see who else is watching. My dad's watching in Kerala. Hi, Acha. And my mom, they're both watching. And my mom says, another interesting program. Thank you. Thank you, Amma. Love you. Doug says, MH370 had a highly experienced pilot. The Pakistan airline pilot fraud is incredible. and surprising. And a very important point there that the MH370 story has not been solved. It's
no. There was a great Atlantic piece about it, I think from a year ago. And what that piece was saying was that this man, I mean, quite possibly flew the plane intentionally. Yeah, it's really tragic.
And I remember that was the biggest story in the world for several weeks. And there would be breaking news. And when I would say shh to my son so that we could watch, he'd say, "There's nothing new, Dad. I promise you there's nothing new." And there would be nothing new. There'd be all these rumors and things like that. Very, very sad. And Stefan says, Vandana wins the wild and scariest story of the night. I didn't know it was a contest. But
I didn't know.
We should do this as a contest. That'd be really funny. Most most scary. Where we both of you.
I write a weekly newsletter for the Juggernaut. I help write it, and they cover South Asia and South Asian stories. And every day we have a call where we go over major headlines of the day. And my editor once told me, now it's become like a daily update. Like, we know at 7 p.m. Vandana, you're going to call us and give us like a lowdown of all the terrible things that have happened across the world.
Okay. And here it says, Stefan says, news you missed with Vandana and Rob, and AKA Bob, is a great Sree COVID-19 call staple. Thank you. Radian says, I can imagine that foldable or rollable screens will help accelerate the demise of print newspapers and magazines. Very, very interesting. And story quoting New York Bob, Rose has tweeted that. Mark says, I had a flip phone last year. They still exist. Very few of them, but they exist. And then me and New York Bob remember 8-track, way before your time, Vandana. I remember 8-track too.
8-track is the music streaming service. Yes?
No, it's not. Bob, correct her.
Oh, streaming service? Okay, it would take too long to correct her.
It was just the way they were sets. There was a thing called 8-track, and then there were LPs. They were all different formats of technology.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, they may be, in fact, a service called 8-track. Who knows?
No, 8-track was the precursor to SoundCloud. So like the place where like people could upload.
So they may use that name for sure.
Yeah, that's I didn't know that.
But what Mark, as I said, the olds, or as Radian said, the vintage people are talking about 8-track tapes or cassettes.
Right.
I forget what they call them. And here are two perspectives. And Mark says, I was startled last year when my nephews called me from their cell phone. They were 10 and 11 at the time. And I think we see lots of young folks watching the South Asian stories you need to know at thejuggernaut.com. Wow, look at that, Rahadyan.
Yeah, and the newsletter is free.
Yes.
So subscribe.
Yeah, please subscribe and support the work that the journalists do. Chitachi says, good evening all. Chitachi, we have to talk. We'd love to have you back on our air and talking. We met when you were on the read-along maybe 3-4 years ago, but we'd love to have you back. And now I feel incredibly old, says Radian. And he still has 45 RPM records. And Rose says 8-track. 8-track was way before CDs. That's right. All of us are now remembering. Folks, tell us where you're watching from. Tell us the stories you missed or you didn't miss that you don't want us to miss. This is your chance to do so. So just comment, because it's great for us to learn. Let's see. I know there was a story here that Bob has brought us from the Atlantic. So let's pull that up. And Bob, set the scene for us, please.
Well, here again, this is another alert from my friend, Melissa Perrinson. She's a former colleague from my PC Magazine days. And she, since Vandana had just mentioned the Atlantic, it reminded me that she had just sent me this. And I was listening to the PBS NewsHour, as I usually do, with Judy Woodruff. And they have the section where, trying to get the names right, Mark Shields and David Brooks, the two commentators. And Mark wasn't on today, but David was. And he was just sad because I shouldn't say his presentation was sad. He was just sort of depressed because of how badly the US is doing in this coronavirus mess. We're so behind so many other countries, and we have the better resources. And I saw this story in The Atlantic, which just flushes what he was talking about out, how we're viewed from the from the other side, wherever the other side might be it Korea or France or Canada. We're not doing the job, and that's basically what David Brooks said on TV, and that's basically what this writer says in The Atlantic. We're not making use of our medical and knowledge power, mainly because we don't have that centralized support from where in Washington, that building in Washington, D.C. And this is also my effort to steal an international story from Vandana.
I love it. You have succeeded by
It's a successful crossover.
Yeah, exactly. Successful crossover there. I can't tell you how upset I am. I mean, I have told you, basically. I've been talking about it now for maybe 50, 60, 70 days in a row. The investment, the time, the sacrifice that everyone's made has just gone out the window. And here we are. And we are so sorry to see this. And America is hitting high after high after high in the number of deaths, in the number of new cases. Just stunning and so sad to see it. And it's great to see The Atlantic writing so many good stories. And I hope everyone is supporting magazines, journalism, newspapers. We need to support organizations that are doing the reporting. The president tells you that the press is the enemy of the people, and the press is the people. And therefore, we need to support and send good stories, good news into the good, accurate news. It doesn't have to be good news at all, but it has to be accurate news. And that's what, in part, why we have the show. And Vandana and Rose and I, who produce this, we're constantly looking for great guests, and we have them all the time because people want to speak and want to share and want us to learn. Let's see, we have some more comments coming in, and then you'll, my fellow speakers here will give me a couple more stories. I think we have time for one story each from each of you. So we'll line them up while I'm looking at these comments.
While you're looking at the comments, can I just say one thing? It's really fast. I figured I wanted to do something for the second half of this very bad year. We're finally in the second half of 2020. So on the 1st of this month, I renewed in order, and on the same day, my memberships in the National Association of Black Journalists, the Deadline Club, which is the New York chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists, and my membership in the National SPJ. Why? Because of just what you said. Those organizations need our support. If you watch their Twitter feeds, they're backing up the reporters who are being either pushed around or spoken of in terms of fake news. So the organizations need your help, and I'm not doing an ad for them, but I kind of believe in them.
Thank you. That's terrific, and we should just tell people that you were the president of the Deadline Club in New York and very active in the New York Association of Black Journalists, and of course SPJ, Society of Professional Journalists. So thank you, Bob, as always, for setting a great example. And everyone should, whatever they can afford. We also want to note that there's a time of 40 million unemployed people as well. And by the way, those good numbers we saw just yesterday in the uptick, most of them are jobs in the service sector that were people temporarily laid off, and now many of those things are being closed again. So you can imagine dozens of Apple stores reopened, and then they're all closing. So everybody who was brought back to work counted as numbers in the positive side, and already by the time they were reported, they were already closed the stores. So these numbers are, and you saw the president taking credit for those numbers, and he's not taking credit or the blame or even talking about the 126,000 people who died. It is so upsetting to see that. And the other people to blame on this are Fox News. They had on the nightly news, on the morning news 2 days ago, they didn't mention coronavirus for the first 14 minutes. Instead, they mentioned the statues and they mentioned other things and Trump and this and that, but didn't mention coronavirus on a day where it hit an all-time high in new cases. That is malfeasance on the part of journalists who call themselves journalists. Sean Hannity, that's what he does. But what do you say to the news executives who signed off on this? What do you say to Mr. Murdoch? Forget old man Murdoch, but the younger generation that's much more in charge now. They will have this blood on their hands when the time comes. when the reckoning happens, and it's very, very sad to see. Vandana, you have a thought?
No, we see the same. I just wanted to add that the Atlantic also laid off a lot of people, forced to lay off a lot of people I think at the end of May. And it's just, yeah, really tragic. And similar thing is happening in India. There's a lot of right-wing news channels that don't seem to want to cover the real things that matter and are instead just kind of praising the Prime Minister for how he's behaving with diplomatic crises. India's involved in quite a few diplomatic crises right now.
Chichachi says, I'd love to come on. Please message me, Chichachi. We'll make that happen. Radhyan says, I hate to tell Vandana about Edison cylinders. Yeah, that's really old school. Stefan says, my father, RIP always, used to salvage 8-tracks and sell them to the 99-cent stores all over Manhattan. He owned a tape and record salvage company. Stefan, I had no idea. We talk about your mother, who was one of the first women NYPD officers on the force to patrol the streets and carry a gun back in the early 70s. But we've never talked about this. So RIP to your dad, and helping music and information get out there. So salute to him. And thanks, Stefan, for telling us. We'll talk more. And Mark says, you're a great guest on the podcast. Must get you back on. What projects are you working on? That could be referring to many, many people. So I don't know who exactly he's talking about. Bob, have you been on Mark's show yet?
I have not.
Okay, so you got to get you on that show. It strikes me that if you were ever to do on South Asian focused speculative fiction and future shock, a great guest would be the writer Marianne Mohanraj. Let me try to reach her out to her this weekend. Yeah, Marianne is great. I know her very well. She's known for science fiction, erotica, all kinds of things that she writes about, and just very well known and a leading writer, not just South Asian, but an American writer. Mark says, remember, I'm a radio guy. Wonder if she knows reel to reel. So this is, I think, ageism being discussed here, where
I want to add, I have actually seen recorded cassettes from the 80s. I grew up, like my mom, we have all of her, I don't know if you ever did this, Sree, but just the idea that my mother used to go to music shops and ask them to record the Billboard Top 100 is just insane to me.
Hitachi says, hey, Mark, sure, I'll DM you, let you know what I'm up to. Love authors on my podcast. Let me know when you reach Marianne. And Stefan says, so this is what he had already talked. And I used to skateboard around Washington Square Park Circle with my 8-track playing Kiss's Rock and Roll All Night, zooming around the park at light speed. Greenwich Village kids stories. Yeah, he was a kid in Greenwich Village, so he will obviously have great stories. Radyan says the current POTUS doesn't want news, he wants propaganda. Sunny says current America is an example to show how to fail by staying divided. Atmosphere is filled with hate. Sunny, you are right, and very, very sad. And Chitachi says the press is the people. Rose says, despite publishing so many great stories, the Atlantic laid off staffers at the beginning of the pandemic. You are right. Ashok says, Kerala is getting more hot these days with more than 200 cases yesterday. More restrictions on the anvil, more containment zones, more cases of unknown origin of positive cases. And Radyan says, Fox News is Pravda. And I have lived in the Soviet Union when I was a kid. I know the damage Pravda did to the people of Soviet Union. And by the way, did you see that Putin is now going to be in power till he's in his 80s, and 70% of the or 73% of the vote came in for him? I wonder what's going to happen to the other 27%. They're going to disappear maybe because they don't tolerate dissent there. Trump loves authoritarians, and you saw the horrible story about Russia offering bounties to the Taliban to kill Americans. Any other president, that would be his number one priority if there wasn't a pandemic. Here, even with or without the pandemic, that's not a priority because clearly he wants to do whatever Putin wants. And
I have two things quickly to add to that. I think last week or the week before was the bloodiest week in Afghanistan's in the last 20 years since the war began in Afghanistan. And that's crazy to imagine because they should be wrapping up the war. But I think 200, almost 300 people died, 291 people died in 1 week. It's the deadliest week. And so I think
I had
that's
no
really
idea.
tragic.
Bob, did you know that? I didn't know
No,
that.
I did not.
I mean, the US is pulling out troops. I think they wanted to get down to 8,000 troops by the end of July, and they're way ahead of schedule. So I think the troop numbers are down to 4,000. So the US is making a really quick exit. So we're looking at further destabilization there. And also with Russia, when you were talking about the people who 70% voted for him, apparently bookstores began to sell the new Russian constitution weeks before the constitution was amended earlier this week. So that's how sure they were that this would happen. And it's interesting because that's also manufactured news.
Yeah, it's true. Roberta is watching from Richmond, Virginia. Hi, Roberta. Thank you for always supporting us. Rose says, I'm now subscribing to the Hartford Courant and renewed my subscription to the Washington Post and also get the NYT. Bravo to Bob for renewing his memberships in journalism organizations. Thank you, Rose, for your support of journalism. Chitachi says, I've been saying that for years that I need to join NABJ. I'll make that happen this year. Bob, look at that. You made a sale. That's great.
Where's my commission?
Yeah, and make sure everybody you follow at New York Bob and follow Vandana_Menon and you follow Rose Horowitz 31. And if we're not connected on LinkedIn, please connect with me, Twitter, YouTube, and also on Facebook. Sreenet is the easiest way to find my archives of all our shows. And let's see here. Mark says, Roberta, when did we say we were getting you? See, he's doing his bookings right here. This is great. Rose is pointing to a story in the Atlantic that you mentioned. And then we have another story from Bob. Let's pull that up. And this is about journalism. Go ahead, Bob.
Sure. And it's just on, it's just, let's see, do you have the story? Yes, you do. It's just a little take on how journalism is being done nowadays. Even before the pandemic, newspapers were cutting staff, laying people off. A couple of friends of mine are on furloughs, like on 3 weeks, off 1 week, or they're simply fired. But a number of newspapers are obviously working remotely during the pandemic, including the New York Times. I put up this story because it goes beyond even what the Times is doing. The Times is allowing most reporters to work from home until, I guess, next year. But in Miami, at the Miami Herald and the Spanish newspaper listed there as well, Nuevo Herald, they're not just working from home, they're moving out of their office and they'll decide on what they're going to do about real estate some other time. So this is how bad it's gotten. They're basically abandoning the newsroom and allowing, they'll figure out how they're going to sit down and cover the news later. They're doing it without a place to meet, which is, it just blows me away.
You, of course, have worked as a freelancer for a long time. How do you think that will work out for folks in journalism to run a newsroom? It's one thing to do what you do as a freelance writer. It's another for us to have produced this series of shows, 114 days like this, or run our business remotely. But what do you think for newsrooms? How does that, I'd like to hear both your takes on that. So Bob first. Yeah.
Sure. Technically it's possible, but as a working newsroom, I don't think for the long term that works. At least in the old days, newsrooms worked a lot with interpersonal communications, otherwise known as yelling. Your editor yelling at you to get this done or that done. And it's too easy to hide behind a camera that allegedly doesn't work and a microphone that's somehow got on mute. It's doable. You can cover, and they're doing it now, the news without being in the same room. Technology needs to take another leap to be a little bit more smoother and to the point where you don't have to think about it before I can equate this to working out of a real newsroom.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the reason why I have the virtual background here is so that people cannot see my cassette tapes, 8 tracks, and floppy disks.
No, I still have all of my CDs from when I was growing up in like cartons. But going back to newsrooms, I have actually never worked in a proper print newsroom. I'm still at the beginning of my career. In India, I worked at The Print, which is a digital startup. And so we were a very small team, and I loved it. And it was just electrifying to be in a newsroom when like so many important things were happening. And I had editors who would be like, wait until you work at a proper print newsroom. And then I went to grad school, and now I've graduated into the pandemic, basically. I think it's interesting because there's never been a better time to be freelance.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so I don't know what that means for the future. Especially when media seems to be hemorrhaging money, basically, even though news consumption is so high right now. I don't know. I'm curious. Let's see how things pan out.
I think you've described that what you're doing right now is basically the future. You're obviously prepared to work on your own, unsupervised, and get the work done. So you're basically an example of how it's going to be done moving forward. And maybe it doesn't work the way
I'm still trying to make my peace with that. I think I would really like at this juncture in my life, I would love to be part of a newsroom, and I would love to get that one-on-one, or not one-on-one, but have that environment kind of nurture me as a growing journalist. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm just trying to make my peace with that fact. Yeah, I'm lucky that I have the flexibility to be able to write and cover things and I'm lucky to be able to have platforms to publish on as well. So because I know this isn't easy for so many people.
I'll give you one tiny insight and then shut up. I was happy to be in the newsroom when I was a reporter because yes, you needed to talk to the editors, the other reporters, and basically be in the newsroom atmosphere. But when I was a copy editor for the Daily News and I wasn't that neck deep in the reporting side of it, I was happy not to be in the newsroom politics. I could go home and leave it behind. So as I got older, I didn't appreciate the newsroom chatter as much. So it blows both ways.
Mm-hmm. I can believe that. I had lots of editors who'd come in halfway through and head out.
Folks, I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow we have a very special episode of this show. We are going to do What America Means to Me, and we're going to have some special guests joining us. You can submit your video and participate. Flipgrid.com/SreeJuly4. Just write that down. Flipgrid.com/SreeJuly4. And you can record a video and send that to us. And we will play that video for all of us to learn from and share. So please participate. It's episode number 115, What America Means to Me. Flipgrid.com/SreeJuly4. I've already seen some of the videos that have come in on my WhatsApp. Some have come in this way, but we would love to hear from you. And please participate either by sending at flipgrid.com/SreeJuly4, or if you want to WhatsApp me or some other way, get me that video. We would love to have it. Let's see here. We have just a couple of minutes left with our great guests, and let's see what are some of the comments coming on here. Ashok says, Indian Council of Medical Research is talking about a vaccine by August 15th. First of all, August 15th is India's July 4th. And
Independence Day.
And that would be like an amazing coincidence. Do you think that that's even plausible or possible? Everything else I've seen is talking about early next year. So what do you know about this, Vandana?
I think it's called Covaxin or something, and they've fast-tracked it. They've started clinical trials, and they want to launch it. And it's being done by forgotten the name, but I think it's a Hyderabad-based pharma company in collaboration with the Indian Council of Medical Research. So they've announced their plans to have this Covaxin ready. I don't know about whether it's going to be effective. That we should ask on She's on Call.
Yes.
Could I ask a quick question? I've seen I haven't heard as much as you have, but I've seen on social media that there's a photo going around with one of the Indian officials taking the first dose, and that particular image is a hoax. Maybe the is in the works, but whatever image of that first dose is, I'm not sure if it was Snopes that knocked it out of the water or what. There's a hoax photo going around of that vaccine, but it's clearly not true.
I would not be surprised. There was an Ayurveda, which is natural, herbal, indigenous medicine. There was an Ayurveda cure that was being touted about, but by this, I'm trying to explain Baba Ramdev.
Maybe a god man is a
a god. And it's interesting because he's a god man, but he runs a company called Patanjali, which sells all these kinds of products. And he had released this new product, and it's quite ironic because one of his workers who was kind of promoting it and saying this will cure it, he got COVID, and then said, "I never said this was a cure. I just said it could help." So that's also that's real news, unfortunately. But that's also been happening in India.
And the name of that product is Coronil. So they even had a name that people would be attracted to because it was Coronil, as it was called. And we're just so crazy that in India there are a lot of people who want to believe in natural medicine, and there's a place for that for sure. And we are seeing, especially when there are no answers that Western medicine provides, that's when people then, there's that information gap, right? And then they fill it with incorrect information, and then we all suffer from that. So go ahead.
We have an American equivalent in Jim Baker?
Tell him about that,
Yeah, he was, he's been discredited so many times, it's not funny, but he's a former very popular evangelist. And he had peddled this silver solution and had even made commercials that says that it washes the coronavirus out. He had to walk that back big time, but it's just what Vandana is saying. You have somebody who people truly believe in, and if he says this will work, they want to take it to heart that it will, but it was it's basically snake oil.
And really pathetic. People prey on folks who are weak, and that's what results in all of this. I wanted to show everybody the story. It's a cautionary tale for everybody. It should be not a surprise that this happened. We're more people this will happen to. But Herman Cain, who ran for president in the last cycle, here he says Herman Cain. It was actually not the last cycle. He ran in 2012, and he was treated for COVID-19 after attending a rally. And this was the Trump rally where there he is without a mask with all of his friends and family. And he says, just a few of the black voices for Trump at tonight's rally have a fantastic time. And now he's in the hospital. When will people learn that science matters, medical knowledge matters, common sense matters? And they've turned wearing a mask into a political statement. And now we are all suffering from this because this is a tragedy for all of us. Let's just wind up here. Rahadian says, people should not be afraid of governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. Alan Moore in V for Vendetta. Have you seen that movie, Bob, or Vandana? It's a great.
I have. Remember the 5th of November.
Yeah, it's about the Guy Fawkes. I mean, it's inspired by Guy Fawkes and the story out of England. Mark says, so my 3 wish list folks, Robert, Vandana, and you, Sree, smile. Still have to get you on. Had Stefan and Sunny on, but not Sree. You're up for August. Sound good to you? Okay. I would be honored to be on your podcast. Ashok says the Indian government has decided to buy crores is a number that means tens of millions of defense equipment from Russia recently. Stefan says, Mark Lee, you must have Robert Anthony and Chitachi on your podcast. They're both tech and media rock stars. Roberta says, I love your show. Thank you, Roberta. And Radian has linked to Marianne. And it's just great to see all these comments coming from all over the world. People are posting here, and look at what Radian's doing. NABJ, that's a Hispanic, Black journalists, Asian American journalists, South Asian journalists, thank you. National Association of Hispanic Journalists, also NAJ, Native American Journalists Association. Man, I love listening to Bob and Vandana and News You Missed. This is my Friday favorite. Thank you. I hope you're not expecting this every Friday because Bob and Vandana have not signed up to do this every Friday. And the Association of LGBTQ Journalists, NLGJA. Radian says, I'm old enough to have taken a programming class in 8081 where I used to teletype machine to access the mainframe 40 miles away from the school
Wow.
district. For your PC, we had a Commodore PETS. It took a 1K cassette drive, which is just amazing to think about. Mark says, this is, I hope you didn't mind.
Of
And
course
Mark
not.
says, I'm in my late 50s, so I remember when computers took up whole rooms, and now we have laptops and even smaller and even rollable phones, not just foldable phones. Vandana's experience worked in a newsroom, but for a digital publisher, now is freelance. You're prepared to work on your own without the supervision. I'm lucky I have the flexibility, and I think many people understand that. Ashok says Countercurrents is another online magazine offering different news happening across the world. I'm not familiar with that. Have you seen it, Vandana?
Yeah, I've seen it.
And Stephanie says, by the way, everyone, please tune in the morning to my latest Spin It social hour with a great sports photographer, Justin Burrell out of Pittsburgh, who freelances with Getty Images. Help me support our photo community who have been hit so hard by this pandemic and economic crisis, right here on Facebook at facebook.com/StephanSpinItSocial, on Twitter @SpinItSocial. And I've been entreating everyone to work on something, and this was his work on something project. Spin It Social Hour. Find it on Facebook and find it on Twitter every Saturday. He does a fantastic job, and at 10 a.m. Eastern time, and you can watch the recording on Spin It Social. Roberta says, TV news is a team sport. Journalists need feedback and editing from colleagues. I think it's a huge loss for the profession and the public to have reporters working without the wisdom of other voices. I completely agree that it's important. Mark says, I remember an old black teletype at my first newspaper in 1984 and remember pulling copy when the Challenger exploded. And I also remember the old linotype guy setting the print. And let's see here, Radian Online News Association. Look at that. He's doing such great work. Rose says, I've been in newsroom and freelance. At the beginning of my career, it was exciting to be in a newsroom and I learned so much, but the world of news is upside down. I think the whole world is upside down. And there's the Society for Professional Journalists, which Bob was a very active member, and Freelance Journalists Union. And there's also ASJA, which is the Association of Journalists and Authors. And Stefan says, it's the busiest and wildest I've ever seen. And Radian says, we always have had snake oil salespeople. And Jim Baker, Radian's just annotating you. This is so cool, Radian. Thank you for doing that. Mark says, is it the same Jim Baker who was South Carolina at some point? Probably. Jim Baker is one place he's heading to in his next life. One clue, it's really hot. We call the people who believe these Indian fake news as pucks, and they are because they are right-wing religious fanatics and nationalists, and they're called pucks in India. Mark says, and also who was an anti-mask person who recently walked back after he got the disease. That has happened to several people. So many comments coming in here, and there's also the Native American Journalists Association. Thank you all for posting here. We could just be here for a very long time. And Rose is putting up the Spin It Social Hour also. So before we go, each of you a final thought for now. And also, how do you find stories like this that you were able to share with us? And let's start with Vandana, and then we go to Bob.
I'm just on Twitter a lot. That's really the only thing. I'm just constantly scrolling through Twitter. And Instagram as well. I remember I said this on our last News You Missed episode. I think Instagram has also become a source of news for at least people my age. I think people are just on it all the time.
Great. Well,
especially during like the height of the protests. They're still going on, but Instagram has come out as like a great place to organize, even though we should be careful about how we're organizing on Instagram.
Sure. And Vandana, thank you very much. Everyone follow Vandana. She's Vandana_Menon on Twitter, and you can find her on Instagram also underscore. Is that correct?
On Instagram, I'm just Vandana with, I think, 4 A's at the end.
Okay. So people will have to find you. All right.
Yeah.
And let's go now to Bob Anthony.
Yeah. Like she said, it's amazing how these platforms are being used for things that they were never intended to. I mean, even Facebook and Twitter, those founders had no idea the president would be using them, or that we'd be using them to the extent that we do. But in my idle time, I've been throwing things out, and I just realized the other day that my first paid journalism job was as a paid intern for the Racine, Wisconsin Journal-Times. and like I said, in the summer of 1980, which makes the summer of 2020 my 40th year in professional journalism. So that just shows how ancient I am.
Congrats.
And most of the computer equipment they were talking about, I recognize, unfortunately. So I'm just glad I'm still working in this industry.
No, that's,
I have one other honorable mention for TikTok, which I think has come out as the breakout star of at least the last 1 year. I think there's been so much interesting stuff happening on TikTok. There's been so much TikTok activism also happening. We had all of those teens at the Tulsa rally buying tickets. In India, TikTok has been banned this week. And since yesterday, lots of unhappy TikTok users have been commenting on Prime Minister Modi's Instagram page, and it's been amusing. Yeah, that's about it. So TikTok has been a great source of news for me.
all right. Thank you, Vandana, and thank you, New York Bob, at New York Bob, B-O-B. You should also follow him on Pinterest. He has 1.2 million followers on Pinterest. You can find him there, and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and everything else. That's Bob Anthony, veteran tech journalist, and we're just delighted to have him here with us, as we are to have Vandana, who is here with us every day because she's one of the producers of the show with Rose Horowitz. Thank you, Vandana. Please follow her, Vandana_Menon, and Vandana with several A's apparently on Instagram. And let's see some nice comments coming in. Roberta says, thank you. Thanks to the great guests. And Jonathan says, delightful show as always. Thank you. And Radyan's commenting in here and posting. There's so much to read, folks. I hope you'll go back in and look. And Mark says, New York Bob, I was at Milwaukee at Marquette 1980 to 84. So remember the Racine area quite well. There's also been breaking news. Kimberly Guilfoyle, the girlfriend of Donald Trump Jr. and a big right-wing, a nationalist, white supremacist, enabler of every level, has been diagnosed with coronavirus. No matter how hateful a person, you don't want them, or you don't want anybody to be diagnosed with this. But the only hope when something like this happens is will the president go on TV and wear a mask and save his own people? He doesn't care about Americans who are not his voters. We know that. But will he care enough to just wear the darn mask on TV? Can he do that? Will he do that? And that is what's happening. One of Dr. Gounder, who many people see on CNN all the time, says that the candidate for president, Donald Trump, told us that he could shoot a person on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose any voters. Right now, he is essentially allowing people to shoot themselves and doing nothing to stop them. It is tragic, it is painful, it is unacceptable, but we are accepting it because that is life in 2020 in America. It is so difficult to understand. My dad says download Chingari, which is a competitor to TikTok in India, and it would help people in trying to discriminate between real news and propaganda. Umima says, thank you so much. And Ashok says, delighted to see everyone here today. And there are cave paintings that have more empathy than number 45. He doesn't care about his own people either. That's interesting, Jonathan, because that's where I thought he cared about them because they could vote for him. But that's interesting, an interesting perspective there. So with that, we're going to let our two folks go, unless if they have a moment and want to join us for our saying their names. Are you up for that, both of you, Bob and Vandana? Thank you. So we'll remind everyone that one of the things we've been doing on the show every episode for the last several weeks now is that thanks to Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, who was on my WBAI spin-off radio show that takes place every Saturday at noon to 2 p.m. Eastern time. I hope you'll join us. Tomorrow we have another great call-in show. My very first guest on that show was Bob Anthony, and that was 15 weeks ago. And Bob was gracious enough to be a guest. And so Kimberly said on the show, she said she's the professor who coined the term intersectionality. And she said to me when I asked, what can we do? She said, say their names. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to say their names, and we'll make this a joint effort of the three of us. I'm going to ask each of them to read the screen and read a few names, and then we will go around and read the. We'll have Vandana start with a few, and then Bob will read a few, and then I will read a few. So let's start here. We're looking at this picture, tragic cover of Time magazine by Titus Kaffer, of a mother whose child has been taken away from her. And on the right, you're seeing a stunning photograph, stunningly painful photograph of young George Floyd with his mother, Larcenia Floyd, who would be killed. He was killed 2 years almost to the day since she died, and they're buried next to each other. Very, very tragic story. And here are the names. And Vandana, you can start us off with maybe reading 5 or 6. Vandana, can you hear me? Bob, maybe you can start us off.
Sure. Trayvon Martin, Yvette Smith, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Laquan McDonald, Tanisha Anderson, Akai Gurley, Tamir Rice, Jerame Reed.
Go ahead, Vandana. You can read. We're up to Jerame Reed.
Natasha McKenna, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Teddy Gray, William Chapman, Sandra Bland, Darius Stewart, Samuel DeVos, Janet Wilson, Kaylin Rockmore, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Joseph Mann, Terence Crutcher.
Bob, go ahead.
Chad Robertson, Jordan Edwards, Aaron Bailey, Stefan Clark, Danny Ray Thomas.
Antoine Rose, Botham Jean, Tatiana Jefferson,
Michael Dean, Emma Robbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd.
And to that list, we have to add names like Rashad Brooks, who was shot and killed on camera. We all saw it, and so many other people. We also had a guest who joined us. Ryan Boudou said his elder brother, Ravi Boudou, was killed at the age of 32 in police custody, and he talked about that on the air, and he believes he was a victim of police violence, and the story was that he wrote the op-ed. You can see the address right there, bit.ly/Ryan op-ed, was shared by Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris. Let me ask Bob, why is it important that we read these names? Why is it important that we say these names in public like this?
Well, besides serving as a reminder as to how many incidents, and this is just a handful there have been, it humanizes them, because a lot of times we only hear about the court trial for this or the appearance for this suspect, or maybe a little snippet about if they had a criminal record, and you don't get the full human story. Akai Gurley resonates with me because he was shot for doing nothing else than walking up the stairwell of a New York City housing project. And I grew up in the Gowanus project, and I know exactly what those stairwells are like. You can't see around the corner. But that was no reason for a police officer to have his gun out just because he heard somebody coming up the stairs. So saying the names definitely humanizes these victims and makes us understand that there's a family, a story, and a community behind each of them.
Thank you.
These deaths are not just numbers.
Yeah, and somebody, the usual response, as you know, from the bigots and the haters is that, well, there's so many more deaths that you don't talk about, including victims of violence in Chicago and other places where there's gang violence and things. Why do you care more about this? And my answer to that, and Bob, I'd like to hear your thoughts. My answer to that is that these are police officers that are held to a higher standard, and no one should be judge and jury and executioner on the street, no matter what the crime. It doesn't matter if they were guilty of something. It doesn't matter. We have a system in this country. And when you ask me what America means to me, that's what America means to me, that we have a country where people are not executed. They're not lynched. They used to be. But in some ways, this feels like we have not changed, Bob.
I have too much respect for police. I mean, I've needed them to deal with, for example, just some people in this neighborhood. I've had to call the police on certain things, and I know the quality of service they can give and the decent people who work behind the uniform. But these particular officers who basically disrespect their own uniform and their own charge to duty are the ones we need to point out when they do these terrible things of instances of disrespect that leads to the death of someone. So it's not that we disrespect the police as a whole. We disrespect those who take their badges as a license to do whatever they want.
And the president is going out of his way to point out some slogans that people have chanted that are truly reprehensible, but that's not the mainstream movement that's happening today. I was in a peaceful protest, with the police right there in New York a few weeks ago. My children, our 17-year-old kids, took us. We were socially distant. We're wearing masks. And there were obviously lots of unpleasant things said, but nothing that was like that. But the president will make it sound like New York is on fire and police are being targeted and attacked every single day in New York. That is just not true. Of course, they shouldn't be attacked or targeted in that way, but it's just the situation we're in. With this, we'll let you go. It's very late. Thank you both for being here. As always, Vandana, thank you. And Bob, thank you very much. And folks, follow Vandana_Menon and at New York Bob on socials. And we will see you folks. We'll let you guys go. I have to thank our sponsors and all of that. Thanks very much. Bye and bye. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you for your support. Please email me, Sree@Sree.net, if you have suggestions for speakers, sponsors, guests, topics. We want you to talk to us, give us ideas. We are going to continue to do this show, and we have to thank our sponsors. GlobalEntrepreneurshipExperience.org. Get 20% off with the code SREE. SREE at GlobalEntrepreneurshipExperience.org. If you have a teenager, it's a virtual teen camp. 20% off with the code SREE. And now I get to play our first ad that we've created for the other show I executive produce. It's called She's on Call.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar. I'm an ear, nose, and throat surgeon in New York City and New Jersey.
And I'm Dr. Marina Kurian. I'm a general surgeon in New York City area.
We'd like to introduce you to our new show, She's on Call. We air live on social media platforms from 11 a.m. to noon every Sunday Eastern Time. We discuss the medical topics of the week.
We have two great guests, experts in their field, that help us analyze and look at some of the topical issues of healthcare. And we are on 11 to 12, so please join us.
We'd love to answer your questions, so please share and watch and send us your questions and comments.
See you Sundays at 11.
Thank you very much for joining us, everybody, and thanks for staying tuned and participating. Please email me, Sree@Sree.net, if you have any questions or comments. My company, Digimentors, executive produces this show as well as the She's on Call show, and we also work with our friends at the News Project, Meryl Brown and Alex Leo. And this week we hosted a conversation with Brian Stelter of CNN, and that you can find at the News Project. And if you have trouble finding any of these, just email me, Sree@Sree.net. We're looking forward to our next set of shows. Let me just remind you, we have lots of great shows coming up, not just tomorrow, What America Means to Me, and on Sunday, we have Positivity with the Krybicks. Dr. Arthi Krybik is running for Congress on Tuesday, and Dr. Thomas Krybick is a neurologist, a doctor, so he'll be answering medical questions. They'll talk about what it's like to be a couple that's super busy doing interesting and important things, and that is on Sunday. And of course, on Sunday mornings, we have the New York Times read-along, and this weekend, an all-star guest. We have the former editor of the New York Times op-ed page and author of Writing to Persuade, an insider's look at the New York Times op-ed page. Trish Hall will be here. Please don't miss this, 8:30 a.m. Eastern on all these channels that you're watching right now. With that, I want to say thank you and good night. Please be in touch. Please email me. And please connect with me on all the socials. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye.